So thus far, we've really focused on religions as religions, right? We've focused on these traditions, and mention of location has been sort of peripheral. Obviously, Hinduism is primarily found in India. The cultures are completely intertwined, interwoven. There's not a drive within Hinduism to make a lot of converts or disciples. There are certain reform movements of Hinduism that do embrace outsiders, but for the most part, traditional Hinduism is not about. It's thoroughly tied to the Indian subcontinent and to Indian culture, wrapped up in the caste system and things like that. Buddhism, we saw, began in India, rooted in kind of these Hindu concepts by a prince who had been Hindu but is a reformer, right? Gautama becomes this reformer and transformer of these Hindu concepts, dharma, karma, samsara. We've talked about that. But Buddhism has a more missional focus, the sense of you ought to go and help others see, to deliver the world from its suffering. And so, unlike Hinduism, and probably more akin to Christianity or Islam, there is this sort of drive to take Buddhism to others. And so we see it spread sort of transculturally. It shifts and moves. It goes to from India down into Sri Lanka, and then moves north and east into Tibet and into China and into Japan, and really going in that direction. That's where we saw those two, the Mahayana, the great vehicle, and Vajrayana, the diamond vehicle. These shifts to where some of this Sangha, this group of monks and nuns, say, look, you're so strict. Those of you who hold to Theravada, the traditions that are passed down, you hold it so strictly that the idea of the Buddha, that anyone can achieve nirvana, has been lost. And that was core to the Buddha's teaching. And so within Mahayana movements or the Vajrayana movement, there's this embracing of other cultures, embracing of other cultures' religious traditions, and a blending of religions. To become Buddhist, for many Buddhists, is not necessarily to reject everything else about a traditional religion. And so you have a blend, as we saw with Vajrayana, with this acceptance, with this idea that the Bodhidharma, like, kind of seized control over the regional demons and brought them into the service of Buddhism in Tibet. And in China, we'll see kind of a movement where Buddhism becomes one of several sort of philosophical religious influences. And it's important to look at China's development, religious development, because you're talking a huge portion of the world's population, about 1.5 billion people of the not quite, or just over 7 billion people in the world, somewhere between 7 and 8 billion people. 1.5 billion of them live in China. So this is incredibly important, but there's not one Chinese religion. Like, there's not, there's a sort of a centralized language for governmental reasons and because of historical reasons, but there's not technically, if you look at the vastness of China, there's not one one exacting Chinese culture. There are regional cultures, there are different language groups, there are some different traditional groups and different traditional religions. And to look at that development can be important to understanding the religion of this huge portion of the world's population. So, if you've ever read, it's a good novel, The Good Earth by Pearl S. Buck. It's about China, leading up to the Cultural Revolution with Mao Zedong and the communists. So that revolution is brutal, and many people are slaughtered by the communists as they seek to kind of create this utopian world and fail. But The Good Earth is about the culture that exists there leading up to that. And one of the things we see is a blending of various traditions, right? There's one point where the main character is married, his first wife, and they have their first child. And so you have several elements appear in this one part of the story, because the baby is born, and the first thing they do is take the baby to a shrine to kind of these regional gods and spirits to make a sacrifice. And all the way on the way there, they talk about how ugly the baby is, how sickly this baby is. This baby probably won't live for a day. Oh, this poor, sick, ugly baby. Because there's this superstition that the spirits and the demons will try their best. They'll become jealous. If you talk about how beautiful or wonderful the baby is, that these spirits will become very jealous, and they might kill the baby. And that's called the evil eye. That's actually a superstition in many cultures, is that there are these spirit beings that will become very jealous and try to kill your child if you say too many good things, if you make them jealous. And so there's that superstition. And then there's an element of a sort of religious element tied to that, where they go to the shrine, to local kind of traditional gods and spirits, and offer these offerings. And that's rooted in traditional religion going back far back. But then there's one of the next things they do is this was a lower class family, and the wife had been actually purchased from the community leader in the nearest large town, the Mandarin, and she had been a servant in his house, and her freedom had been bought, and she was married. And so they take the baby to see the Mandarin, because you must show respect to elders and leaders. And this is an element of Confucianism. We'll talk more about Confucianism today a little bit, but that element of Confucianism, that aspect is this importance of hierarchy. You also see elements of Buddhism. They have the baby in Buddhist clothing with Buddhist symbols on it. There are elements of Taoism, this desire for kind of balance, and so all these things are present together. They grow up together and intermingle, these various religious traditions from ancient to reforms of Confucius and Lao Tzu and Buddhism, and you have this blending of beliefs. Taoism and Confucianism come to China rather late. Taoism is about this relation of opposites, the yin and the yang. Confucianism is about order and hierarchy and developing societal order. Taoism is about working with the order of the world as we find it, finding sort of an inner existence that allows you to move in the world without chaos. For ancient cultures, the big fear is chaos, and what we want is order. And so these are two paths to finding order in the world around us as we find the world around us. Taoism, the world writ large; Confucianism, in some sense, the world writ in culture. Taoism is sort of the religion of the natural way. Tao means way, and it's extended to mean way of life. Confucianism, this is a Western term referring to religion based on reforms by Confucius. And we could argue whether or not it's a religion or a philosophy, because Confucius basically accepts kind of ancestor veneration, ancestor worship. He accepts the sort of religious norms of his times. He just focuses on why and how kind of ritual and these traditions are so important. So he's not creating new gods, he's not creating new ways, he's bringing kind of philosophical analysis and cultural ordering as central, connected to prior to Confucianism and Taoism, China is like most ancient cultures. There's this settlement along a river basin. You have sort of these city-states that are highly militarized. Your religions include polytheism. We find things in archaeological digs that show inscriptions in pottery. Evidence of divination being practiced. This is where you look at bones or shells or the innards of animals, or tea leaves in the bottom of a cup. In ancient Egypt there was this practice of dropping oil into a cup of wine, and the way it moved, a divine could figure out kind of future realities, what was coming. And this is all a part of ancient cultures. We have these dynasties eventually develop, right? Where after the Shang is the Zhao dynasty. Taoism enters into this world sometime between 500 BC and 200 AD. We see in the Tao is not necessarily creating a new religion per se, but it's in this context of Chinese folk religion. There's the composition of the Tao Te Ching sometime between 350 and 250. Why the difference in the dates? Number one, we're not exactly certain that there was a Lao Tzu, but there is this tradition, and it's possible that the tradition dates back further. It's possible that Lao Tzu traveled earlier, and then these teachings are written down by others, 150, 200 years later. And so that's part of what's going on there. Taoist thinkers, they maintain local rituals and beliefs. It's not like this is a replacement religion. It focuses on how to live life in relation to the world, to bring about order to your life, how to order yourself inwardly so as to live in order outwardly. It becomes semi-official religion during the Tang and the Song dynasties. Confucius, similar time frame to when Lao Tzu is around. He's born in a Khufu state of Lu. He gains mastery of these 6 traditional basic arts. It's like archery, chariotry, writing, mathematics. I've lost the others at the moment, but there are these. I mean, you can look those up. Essentially he is a master scholar in the main kind of core fields of knowledge for his day. There is this connection to Chinese history and poetry. History is important because reverence for ancestors to travel and teach. He is a reformer. Now remember, I mentioned that reformers are always looking back. They're not necessarily looking forward or trying to create something new. They're trying to say, here's what we've lost, here's what we need to draw on, here's the core of who we are, and we've forgotten that. And so history is very important to Confucius. He's looking for stability. Remember, this is a chaotic world, a difficult world. And so how do we stabilize life? How do we maintain stability? Well, it's going to be in these kind of cultural relationships, these interwoven and interconnected relationships of mutual obligation and reverence for for ritual. All these things are important to keep our life stable. He's a conservationist in a cultural sense, right? He's not saying here are new values you should embrace. He's saying here are our Chinese values. Here's why they matter. Here's what's good about them. Here's what you can do in life to really fulfill them. And so he teaches this kind of coherent form of thought about life, and it shapes China for the future. It becomes very important. In fact, I'm reading a biography right now of someone much later in China where the Mandarin, the regional ruler, has such incredible importance that if you win the Mandarin's respect, it really opens up doors for you. The Mandarin is incredibly feared and respected, this community leader, because of this idea of kind of hierarchy and reciprocity, mutual obligation. In 1949, the Chinese Communist leader Mao Zedong declared the creation of the People's Republic of China. This is following World War II. There had been a conflict within China between the Nationalist Party and the Communist Party since the 20s. When the Communists win, there's just mass slaughter, and the Communists want to just remove all religion. It's just the Communist is an atheistic regime, and it strips China of its Confucian and Taoist culture. There's an attack upon Buddhism. There had been a growing Christian population. There's tremendous persecution of Christians in certain western regions of China. We'll talk about this as we move through this week. But in western regions of China, there are various Muslim communities, and they face tremendous persecution because for the communist regime, the government must be the authority. There can be no God, there can be no religion, there can't be other loyalties. And so there's this movement to kind of exterminate religion. Nonetheless, even to this day, while officially the nation is atheist and about a little over 50% of the people are atheists, there's still pockets of those ancient folk religions dating back centuries. There are still a significant Buddhist population. In China, there's still a significant and growing Christian population in China, and a very significant Muslim population in China. Taoism did not fare so well, though lately the government has been kind of reviving these Taoist sites to some degree for kind of tourist purposes. But there's also a revival of Confucianism, which you'll read about this week. So that's kind of what we're going to look at with Confucianism and Taoism. But it's important to understand when we look at China. We'll come back to this at the end of the semester. So keep this in mind, that looking at how kind of religion relates to the pressures of the modern world is going to be a significant point of comparison when we look at the modern world and religion at the end of the semester.